Hey everyone, this is Malthus. I now have about 20 something hours in the game, and since we're about to have launch in a couple of days, I wanted to go ahead and make a video explaining just the highlights for each class and subclass so that you have a better idea of what you'd want to play if you want to check the game out. So, a few things before we begin. My glasses aren't sunglasses. They just help me, not get migraines when I'm reading off of a screen, and I actually did prepare notes for this one, so yeah, way less impromptu than last time. Also, my wife is sitting right over there, so if she bothers me, I'm going to have to go over there and just, berate her or something. She's puzzling. Are you waving your... Get out of my frame, dork. Get back to your puzzle. Women. Anyway, sorry. So, basically, we're going to go through each of these 5 base classes and all of their subclasses. I'll try to do chapters for each one of them so that if you want to go to any one of them independently, you can. But before we get started with that, I do want to point out a few things. So anytime you go into a class, either a base class or any of their subclasses, you'll be able to go over here and read their base skills. This is before they're augmented, but what it will do is it'll give you kind of the flavor of what's going on. And also, if you look at the scaling tags at the bottom of Rebuke under that blue heading, it'll show you the kind of stuff that it needs to have to do well. So, like if we go to this Warpath, which is really just Whirlwind, you can see it's an area of effect, channeled. It bases its damage on strength, counts as a melee, and uses physical damage. So, that's the kind of stuff you're going to need to consider whenever you want to do your build. Okay? So, we're going to go ahead and start on the Sentinel. This dude not only looks like the Paladin from Diablo 2, but he pretty much is the Paladin from Diablo 2. In fact, one of his subclasses is the Paladin. So what I'll do is we'll talk about the base class, and then we'll talk about what each one of these does to him. Basically, I'm going to tell you what flavor it gives him. So the Sentinel is basically a warrior. Not a lot of magic. He's got Whirlwind, Shield Bash, Javelin Throw, Rebuke, Multi-Strike, and Lunge. So it's a lot of stuff that a warrior would use. Think Barbarian from D2. But as soon as you go into any of these, he starts to get magical. Not that these aren't magical, but they all start out as kind of basic physical things. So if you go into Void Knight, you're going to take some of the darkness that's in the game, which is one of the main characteristics of this like corruption, and it does void damage. And so you're going to take that and you're going to start using it in your attacks. A lot of his attacks as a Void Knight are going to be AoE and based on this void damage. Okay? So it's a lot of spells. So the flavor I picked out for him was like a warrior mage or like a Skyrim heavy armor mage. So if that's something that interests you, you might check it out. A Forge Guard, I put that the flavor here is a grumpy dwarf because what you do is you pick up armor and weapons, and then you can basically animate them to use as weapons on the battlefield. And so the cool thing is it gives you minions, which is hard to come by on the Sentinel class. What is that, babe?
It was a Valentine's Day candy I got.
Let me see that.
And we're to show your dad.
Look at this. Look at this. She's got a tackle box full of gummy worms.
It said...
How is this? Is not fair.
It said on it, like, something about beating my heart or
Oh
something.
my god.
Look at this.
Anyway. So, as a Forge Guard, you're going to get to animate your armor, and you're going to animate your shield, and I believe you can do your weapon too. One of the cool things about this one is it feels a lot like the Iron Golem from Diablo 2, where like if you have a really good piece of like gear, you can impart that into the golem. But in this one, it's, you still get to keep it. You aren't using it. Paladin is one of the most dedicated support classes in the game. It has healing. It has an aura. So it really does make it like a Paladin from D2. And a lot of it deals with like smiting things. So if that's your power fantasy, if you want to be the one to like purge corruption, check out a Paladin, especially if you have people to play with. It's going to be an amazing addition to any group of 2 or more. So moving on to the Rogue, this is your dex-based finesse DPS character. Okay. While you're a rogue, you don't really have a lot of like specialties. You have caltrips or shurikens, not caltrips. I'm sorry, that was a D3 slip. You have shurikens. You have shift for mobility, smoke bomb. You know, it's basically just the demon hunter from D3. Uh, like you got summonable ballista instead of turrets, but from everything I've seen, it's really fun, really fast. Blade Dancer is for those of you who want to stay melee range. It's going to give you high mobility, high damage. Okay, a little bit more survivability because you're going to be in the mix, but you're still going to have to be very careful. The lethal mirage is a really cool thing. It makes a bunch of mirages of you, and you can't take damage till they're all dead. So that's kind of cool. Marksman, if you want to be a Lord of the Rings elf, this is what you're going to play. Okay, so it's a lot of AoE, and you can do like elemental effects on your different skills to try to give like status effects to things, and it can be really nice as a support to a group. It is a little rough playing as like a solo character on boss fights because you don't have a lot of extra mobility compared to just base rogue, and your damage is going to be good, but it's mainly going to be really good for multiple fights. And then we can't click on Falconeer. It's coming out with launch, but it's going to be a very unique pet class that we're going to have for the rogue. Its flavor is going to be like a very rich single pet noble. Like if you had a very rich guy who has a pet falcon, you know, he goes on hunts with. So instead of having lots of pets, which most pet or minion classes do, this one's going to have one, and you can specialize it immensely. Not only that, you're going to have a lot of like combos with it. And you can see all of those on the Last Epoch main channel, their VODs and stuff. I'll put a link to that in the description, and it basically gives a really good like look into the Falconeer. Next, we're going to talk about the Mage. The Mage is elements to create combos that apply status effects to enemies, and they cannot stop moving or they'll die. That's about it. The different subgroups all play on that, some to different degrees. So the base mage does elemental damage in all of the same ways that a D2, D3, or PoE mage would. But you know, it's got some fun things. When you go into sorcerer, you are the nuke. Okay? You are a arcane blasting glass cannon. He's less about taking a hit and more about turning enemies into mush or dust or ash or really anything that needs to be scooped up with a broom. And he has a mode that turns off his movement and supplies him with near infinite mana so that he can just dump mana onto the field as damage. It's a high risk, high reward playstyle that works really well in a team. So something to think about if you're going to run a team, you know, maybe this and a paladin would be really good. If you want to be the genie from Aladdin, who's pissed off because somebody kept wishing to bring people back from the dead, you're going to try the Spellblade. He substitutes his long-range magic for short-range magic and melee enhancements. He uses Enchant Weapon to give his weapon different elemental styled attacks. And he also uses all of his other mage abilities to wreak havoc within a melee range. He's much more mobile than a regular mage, and he has a lot of abilities to get out of tight jams. So it can be really fun, but I've heard it's very difficult to learn how to do well. And in fact, the third one, Rune Master, is the highest skill level of pretty much any class, from what I understand. The way it works is, I'll just leave this up. Basically, whenever you cast a spell, whatever spell that whatever elemental type that spell is, gives you a marker. So like if it's a fire spell, it'll give you a little fire marker. And after you get 3 of those, you can release them and it'll do an effect. And depending on which rune set you have. So if you have fire, 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 it does one thing. If you have fire, cold, cold, it does something else. You get different effects. Could be just a blast of cold, could be a giant fireball. It can be lots of stuff. And so memorizing all the different patterns and working those into combos is incredibly hard, but gives you incredible flexibility once you get the basics concepts down for the class. Aside from that, it's got a lot of just basic utility stuff, and it's more utility organized. It's more utility focused than Spellblade or Sorcerer. So that could be a cool one if you're looking for like a secondary character to work up and have a little bit more of a challenge with. Moving on to the Primalist, this is the Druid from Diablo 2 plus. Okay, he has a minion tree, he has a elementalist tree, and he has a shapeshifting tree. He's the same. He's just better. So, as a Primalist, you're going to have some wolves. You're going to have thorn totems that are basically just like pets. And basically, you're just going to use a combination of elementalist and pet attacks to take down your foes. You're going to be very tanky compared to the other classes. He's second tankiest next to the Sentinel. If you go down Beastmaster, you're going to pick up a lot more customizable pets. We're talking like raptors, bears, sabertooth, and scorpions. And so you're going to have, you can have like lots of one type, or you could have just like one of each, depending on how you stack your spec. Okay. So a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll just have a shitload of wolves. You know, it's just something they do. Or they'll have, they'll focus all of their strength into like one animal or two. And it's the power fantasy of having an army of animals that are highly customizable. And aside from that, it's just really fun because there's like uniques in the game that turn your pets into other kinds of pets. Like I think there's one that turns your wolves into squirrels, and then you can have an army of squirrels. It basically be Squirrel Girl from X-Men. If you do Shaman, you're going to be the Walking Storm is what I deemed it. Instead of doing so in Diablo 2, the Druid used Blizzard, Volcano, and I believe it was Thunderstorm. In this game, it's mainly or lightning damage, from what I understand. But there's also going to be Earthquake and like a Blizzard type thing, an Avalanche type mechanic. So you're going to do a lot of elemental damage, and you're going to be relying a lot on your melee attacks too, because a lot of your big AoE damage you cast and then it stays around you for a while. And then if you do Druid, it's the shapeshifting. So instead of werebear, werewolf, like in Diablo 2, it's werebear, and then there's also like Spriggans and Swarm Blades. Okay, so there's lots of customization. You're going to do a lot of AoE melee damage. You're going to do a lot of like direct damage to people. It's good for tanking. It's good for single target DPS. And then the last one is Acolyte. This is the Necromancer's Necromancer. Just the base class gives you access to 2 types of minions, and then depending on what you secondary into, you might get more from that. So the Acolyte focuses on necrotic and poison damage. She's really good at summoning skeletons that you can customize into warriors, archers, or rogues. And then she also gets big old golems. If you choose to, you can turn her into a necromancer, and necromancers get even more minions. So she gets mages, wraiths, and And you can do an abomination, which eats all of your minions and makes one giant one. It's kind of a cool thing. This is really fun because in this game, necromancers don't have to make corpses to raise undead. So that's kind of nice. You can just summon them if you have the mana. The cooldowns on mana or on minion cast spells are pretty low. And so, it's not like if your golem dies mid-battle, you're going to lose. So that's good. The Lich is less minion focused, more life drain focused. So you're going to get a special ability that turns you into the Grim Reaper. And while you are in that form, you don't take damage. It's just that your life is the counter for how long you get to stay in Reaper form. There's all sorts of things that change how much damage you do and what it does while you're in Reaper form. And then you can use things like Drain Life to keep it up longer. So this is the main thing I ran, the first character I ever made. And basically it is highly survivable, and it's probably the highest used thing when it comes to like hardcore characters, just because of its survivability. Warlock is the new one that's going to come out with launch. It is focused on curses and debilitating your enemies. And it switches out the use of necrotic and poison for necrotic and fire. So if you want to take away that kind of like poisonous element that a necromancer or a lich might have, you would add the warlock in there and transform everything into fire and do more of like a Ghost Rider build. So it's something to look into. Like I said with the Falconeer, there's obviously a lot to it that most people haven't done. There's some people that have played it, but most people haven't. There are breakdowns of builds online. So if you're interested in any of these, just hit me up and we can talk about it in the comments, or, I can do a follow-up on any one of them. But I'm sure as we do the launch, everyone's going to be excited to try out a bunch of stuff. And I just recommend, if you have a power fantasy that you like to play in these games, try that one first, but also try something else as you do it. So it's been a pleasure. I will talk to you guys later. And I'm going to do another video here shortly on basic loot filters, because it's one of the most intimidating things to me in the game, and I wanted to make something very basic about it. So I'll talk to you guys later.